people working for that program. So we have Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. They get that grant from NOAA, from its federal grant, and then they distribute money to University of Alaska, Alaska Earthquake Center, and Division of Geological and Geophysical Surveys, where we do the work with coastal communities on tsunami preparedness, tsunami mapping, and so on. So Barrett is from State of Alaska Division of Homeland, Alaska Division of Geological and Geophysical Surveys. So we are going to talk about tsunamis today, and especially tsunamis in Alaska and tsunamis around the world. So he will start with kind of big picture of tectonics and earthquakes and how they happen and why they make tsunamis. And then I will continue about the basic kind of physics of tsunami waves and why it's important to understand why they behave the way they behave and how it is crucial for actually surviving the next one. So.
Okay, so this microphone is, I need to use it for the online folks, is that?
Yeah, if you can, if you.
As long as it's not too loud, I can't really tell if it's on or not.
No, yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Yep, you sound great back.
All right, well, thanks very much for coming, everybody. Like Elena mentioned, I'm Barrett Salisbury. I work for the State Geological Survey, DGGS in Fairbanks. It's right outside of the UAF campus. And we have a geohazards group there. Some of those folks were recently here to talk about landslides and avalanches. And I'm in a separate program in the geologic hazards. And like Elena mentioned, at DGGS, we publish the maps that outline tsunami hazards for Alaska communities. We've got about 65 communities mapped. Actually, it's more like 70 communities mapped in about 65 different reports. And this work in Alaska began in the late 1990s when Elena moved to Alaska and started the program. And so she was here when the federal government first recognized that, hey, this is something that we need to address. And so Elena has been involved intricately in every single one of the tsunami hazard maps for Alaska. And lately that has transitioned into more useful product for folks like maritime guidance, what to do if you're on a boat when a tsunami happens, or where are the most dangerous currents going to be in your harbors and things like that. And so in general, there's two folks at UAF, Dmitry Nikolsky's not here, Dmitry and Elena at UAF, me at DGGS, and Jeremy at DHS and EM. That's it for the tsunami program of Alaska. And we receive our money from NOAA, and we hope to continue doing that. We're waiting on the federal government to decide what its future budget looks like, but we're sitting on the edge here because we may not be doing this in a few more years. So we're glad to be here. So thanks for having us, and thanks again for coming. If you have questions while we're going through these slides, just raise your hand or blurt it out. We don't need to wait till the end. And I guess you should use the microphone for the sake of the recording, but please don't hold the questions in. We're happy to take them as we go. So I'm going to try to spend about 25 or 30 minutes with plate tectonics 101. So this was a geohazards overview, but I cut some of that out for the sake of time. So we're just going to focus on the earthquakes and how they produce big tsunamis and why we care here on the coast of Alaska. Like Elena mentioned, it's a multi-agency group. The bottom part of this shows what Elena and I do. Elena and I help map out the hazards in different communities. And then we work with Jeremy at DHS and EM to interact with the communities, get signs in communities, outline evacuation plans, and ultimately produce things like brochures that we can put in hotels and hand to folks so that visitors to your community and you folks that are here know what to do when it happens. Because when a big earthquake occurs, the types of earthquakes that we're talking about are going to be big and long and strong. So everyone in town is going to get this message that, hey, there may be a tsunami coming. And we don't want you to have to sit around and wonder what to do in those first few minutes. Those first few minutes could be integral to your safety. So knowing where to go, having a plan ready with your family so that if your kids are in school and you're at work, you know what to do. So we're encouraging you all to think about these worst case scenarios that we might never see, it might happen in our grandchildren's lifetime. But what we have here is geologically plausible. And we cannot argue against these cases, and so we come up with these hypothetical earthquakes to put into perspective what the worst case scenario could be here. What we rely on the federal government to do is issue official warnings from the federal government, and that's tsunami.gov. So the official tsunami warnings come from tsunami.gov, and then your community leaders decide if they're gonna sound the sirens or not. So the sirens in this community are not federally controlled. That is up to your community leadership, and so we're here to provide the most information we can so folks know how to react when the national government does say, hey, we think a tsunami is coming your way. So quick overview, actually, we're gonna spend a lot of time, first 30 minutes talking about the tectonic overview of Alaska. So why do we have earthquakes and how can they produce tsunamis? And then the tsunamigenic earthquakes themselves we'll look at pretty closely to see how we disturb the whole ocean and make the tsunamis. And then I lied, we're gonna skip over secondary effects of earthquake shaping for the sake of time. So back to the very basics of plate tectonics, we have to appreciate that the earth itself has a different composition as you go deeper and deeper into the earth. And so the deeper and deeper we go into the earth, the hotter and greater the pressures there are. And that energy inside the earth is trying to escape at all times. And so in a minute, I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. But I just want to outline that the earthquakes that we experience occur in the brittle outer crust. And the crust of earth is kind of like the shell of an egg or the skin of an apple. It's super thin compared to the total thickness of the earth. And we are tiny on the earth. And so the crust to us is pretty huge, but really in broad scheme of things, the crust is super thin. But it's the brittle 60 miles or so of the outermost crust where we can store the energy that's released in earthquakes. Deeper and deeper into the earth, the more the rocks behave like plastics and like liquid. So the rigid mantle, that's described in terms of its strength like bar soap. So if you have a bar soap, you can bend it if you do it slow enough. And so the rocks in the earth are plastic like that. The outer core is liquid and the inner core is solid, but extremely high pressures and temperatures. And that energy is trying to escape from the inner core. And so we're slowly cooling down. We know that over geologic timescales, Earth is slowly cooling down, and we do that by letting that heat escape. And so we produce these convection cells in the mantle as that energy escapes. And I like to equate this to like a big stock pot full of soup that you're trying to bring to a boil on the stove. And if there's a fat layer on the top of that soup, you know, as soon as it starts boiling, it bubbles up in the middle and it rolls out to the edges of your pot. And then the cooler material sinks down back to the bottom where it can heat up. That's basically exactly what's happening in the earth. Except instead of a fat layer on the outside of our soup, we have this brittle crust like the shell of an egg. So the shell of that egg is broken up and it's in constant motion. And where those plates, the tectonic plates or those shell pieces fit together, kind of like puzzle pieces, they're grinding past one another. And that's where we get the earthquakes. And that's what we're going to focus on for the next 20 minutes or so. And so this map of the earth shows the major tectonic plates, each individually colored and separated from a neighboring plate by this big bold line, which is a plate boundary. And again, these plate boundaries are active places. So we're either creating crust. So in the mid-ocean ridge where two pieces of plate spread apart, we're creating new crust where that hot molten material boils up and it hits the bottom of the ocean and cools. So we make new rocks at mid-ocean ridges in the middle of the ocean. The other type of plate boundary that is pretty common in Southeast and California is a strike slip fault. So this is just moving two tectonic plates side to side. There's not much vertical motion. And our Denali fault in the interior, the Queen Charlotte Fairweather, San Andreas, these are all very notable major transform faults. And lastly, we're gonna have two plates coming together. there's two types of convergent plate boundaries. The first type is when you have a landmass coming into contact with another landmass and you squeeze them together, you build huge mountains, like at Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world, highest mountain range in the world. You have two continental pieces of crust smashing together and building up mountains. The other thing you can have happen is you have a oceanic plate come into contact with a continental plate. And that's what's shown in this bottom left-hand diagram. So this Pacific Ocean plate that's out under the Pacific Ocean is moving like a conveyor belt north towards Alaska and then diving down beneath Alaska. So the Pacific Ocean floor is moving towards Alaska like a really slow conveyor belt. And when it gets to Alaska, it dives beneath mainland Alaska. And over millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, this is how Alaska was built. The Pacific Plate conveyor belt brought rocks from other parts of the world. They slammed them into what was already here. We built Alaska by a accretionary subduction zone action. So it's a really interesting place to be, but we have tremendous hazards here at the edge of these two tectonic plates. And so you might be familiar with the Ring of Fire. That's the colloquial name for the earthquake and volcanic activity around the boundary of the Pacific Plate. And we live on a very active part of that Ring of Fire. We have more earthquakes in Alaska than the lower 48 combined. We're the most seismically active state in the US. And we have had the second largest earthquake ever recorded ruptured beneath our feet. It ruptured from here all the way down to the west end of Kodiak Island. So tremendous earthquake rupture in 1964. That was a magnitude 9.2. But we're going to zoom in and focus on what's happening here. This cartoon shows what I'm describing by the word subduction. This Pacific Plate is diving down beneath the Aleutian Island chain and mainland Alaska. And the action of shoving one plate down into the hot earth causes our volcanic activity all the way around the Pacific Ocean, but especially in Alaska, our Aleutian Island chain is a result of the volcanism produced by subduction. So it's all intricately linked, but at about 5.5 centimeters per year, that's about 2 inches per year, that the plates move, and that's about the same rate as your fingernails grow. So over long periods of time, a couple inches a year, it really does add up. And if you give this plate a couple hundred years to accumulate energy, that's several meters or tens of meters of slip that we're going to release in a big earthquake. What's complicating about where we live here is that there is a thickened piece of the Pacific Plate, and then cross section is this thickened piece is called the Yakutat microplate. And this is just more of Alaska being added to Alaska. So we have rocks from far away. The conveyor belt brings it to Alaska, and we slam it into Alaska. And that's exactly where we're stuck right now. We're at the north end of this transform fault. This thickened piece of plate wants to go down under the North American plate, but it's getting stuck. So it's hitting the overriding plate, and it's causing deformation in the overriding plate, in the subducting plate. And the biggest earthquakes in the world come from the interface between the two tectonic plates. And I'm going to do my hand motion like this to show you that this is the Pacific Plate diving beneath the North American plate. But we'll talk in a minute about how the overriding plate is deformed. So in Alaska, we have 40 to 50,000 earthquakes every year. These are all categorized and monitored at the Alaska Earthquake Center at UAF. And these are colored by depth. So the reds are shallow. Yellows are intermediates, and these maroons are deep. So this pattern of earthquakes is defined by the subducting plate. It is the driver of all earthquakes in Alaska, subduction. Even the earthquakes up here in Kaktovik, those are a result of the deformation that is starting here and distributed all the way to the north of Alaska. So I like to say that otherwise this would be pretty simple. We would just have Pacific Plate diving beneath the North American plate, but here in the transition between Queen Charlotte Fairweather Fault and the Alaska Aleutian Megathrust, this Yakutat microplate is really complicating things. None of it is simple, but I just like to point out that we're in an especially complicated place because of that Yakutat microplate. One thing I want to point out, we're not taking too much time, is that the magnitude scale for earthquakes that you all are familiar with is not linear. So as you go up from magnitude 2 to a magnitude 3, there's a couple things happening. Every step up on that earthquake scale is a decrease in the frequency of earthquakes. So there's 10 times fewer 3s than that 2. So we have, for every 10 magnitude 3s, there's 1 magnitude 4. And we can continue that all the way up so that the bigger and bigger the earthquakes are, the rarer they are. We have tons of small earthquakes, tons of little dots here. They don't do much work, but it's the big ones that are rare that do a lot of geologic work and release a lot of energy. They also destroy the things that we build and really affect our lives. So we have to plan for those worst case scenarios. The second thing that happens is you move up that magnitude scale. So each one up, they're less and less frequent, but they're way more energetic. So every step up is a 32 times increase in the amount of energy. So from a 2 to a 3, there's 30 times more energy in that 3, which means a 2 to a 4, that 4 is 1,000 times bigger than a magnitude 2. So you need 1,000 magnitude 5 earthquakes to equal the energy in 1 magnitude 7. And so when we talk about numbers above 8, those are great earthquakes, and we call them great because they're releasing tremendous amounts of energy. And if we look at the entire catalog of all the earthquakes we've ever monitored in the last 100 years, there are about 4 of them that just dwarf every single other earthquake. The 1964 earthquake here, 2011 Tohoku, Japan, 1965 in Chile, was a magnitude 9.5, that's the biggest one ever. But the bigger they are, the less frequent they occur, but the more damaging that they can be. And this puts that into perspective. Each one of these was a significant earthquake when it happened. The 5.8 in Mineral, Virginia caused damage in properly built homes, lots of damage in poorly built homes. But each one of these circles is the amount of energy in that magnitude earthquake. So it's a little jumpy, but we can see that by the time we're showing a 7, that 5 is pretty small. And this goes back to that 32 times increase in the amount of energy every step up. And so we're gonna go all the way to 9.5, but along the way, we totally lose to 5.8. It's almost invisible. There's an 8.6 Aleutian Islands earthquake. Turns out this 8.6 was impetus to establish tsunami warning centers because a lot of people died in Hawaii. Elena may talk about that a little more. But what this shows is that even between a magnitude 9.5 to our 9.2, the biggest, second biggest earthquake in the world, it's a tremendous increase in energy at those large magnitudes. So the bigger the numbers, the bigger they are. So that's why if there's a large earthquake and you get a warning, it says it's a 9.0 or a 8.7, it's important to pay attention to continued messaging, because if they change their estimate of the magnitude and it goes from 8.9 to 9.1, that is not a small amount of energy they're talking about. So when you get warnings for significant earthquakes, keep paying attention in case the magnitude estimate changes. That can be crucial to whether or not you need to evacuate or you need to expect tsunami waves, that kind of thing. So how do we get tsunamis generated out here in the ocean from an earthquake? And I'm going to show you in a three panel description here on the left. This is a time sequence. The first one is right after a big earthquake. So we can imagine that's right after 1964. The tectonic plates have reorganized themselves and they're relaxed, and there's no energy built up in them. But the weight of gravity holding this North American plate on top of the Pacific plate, they're stuck together right there where they're in contact. That's just the way it is, because they're rough rocks and they're super heavy. So they're stuck together where they're in contact with one another. But over time, we continue to shove that Pacific plate beneath the North American plate. And that's what's shown in the second picture with that red line. So there's friction between my fingertips and the back of my hand. And that friction is holding the plates in contact with one another. As we do that, because this far field force is causing the deformation of the plates, we deform the overriding plate, and that's where we live. So not only do we drag the toe or my fingernails, we're dragging my fingernails down because they're stuck together. My hand is bulging up and we're spring loading the overriding plate. And we can monitor this between earthquakes by really high precision GPS measurements. We can see that certain places are rising, other places are falling. And that's a sign that we're loading this crust with elastic energy. Just like a rubber band, you're preloading it with energy. And eventually the friction holding the two plates together is overcome. And at that moment, that's when we have an earthquake and the overriding plate bounces out and up back to its relaxed position. And when we do that, we lift the entire ocean. And so this happened in 1964. The toe of the overriding plate moved 15 meters out and up in about 4.5 minutes. But that rupture patch, so from here to there, and from here to there, this red line is about 150 miles along the plane or along the interface down to the earth. And the rupture patch along strike was 500 to 800 miles long. So it's a huge patch of these tectonic plates where they're normally stuck together, slipping in a huge earthquake and releasing a ton of energy. This animation should show that same thing. So the downgoing plate grabs because of friction, the overriding plate, we build up energy, and eventually it bounces back in a major earthquake, lifts the ocean. This is a complete disturbance of the ocean. It's not like a wind wave that disturbs the top couple feet. It's the entire ocean column. And what makes it tricky is that the behavior of the subducting plates and how they slip is unpredictable. And this is a real analog model that illustrates how unpredictable the release of that friction can be. So as we build more and more time between earthquakes, we get more and more energy stored. We would expect a huge one right now, right? No, it just moved in a teeny little one. Couple teeny little ones first, and then eventually it reaches some threshold where you have the big earthquake. And so we're stuck here living above the subducting plate in a place that's going to get shaken when these earthquakes happen. We know that the forces are constant, but we don't know when they're going to slip. And so that's where we live. That's earthquake country, and that's what we have to deal with. Let's see, did we get the audio working? Oh, we don't really need it in this one. Okay, so a couple points from this video that I want to make. This is from Japan in 2011 after the Tohoku Iki earthquake. It was a magnitude 9.0. They're in a subduction zone setting like this. We live at the coastline. The earthquake ruptured beneath our feet. And this is about 5 or 10 minutes after the earthquake, so the sirens are still blaring, but these folks have had a chance to get to the top of a reinforced building and wait. They have a seawall that they engineered to protect them as much as possible from incoming water waves. But we can already see that something weird is happening out here. And I'm gonna fast forward because it takes about 45 minutes for this wave to come in. But I'm gonna fast forward until the seawall is overtopped. So if they didn't have a seawall, this would already be underwater. You know, there'd be a couple feet of water in here. But this is gonna be really sensational in just a minute when the water comes over that seawall. But just know that without that seawall, you know, this would already be wet. And these folks have been there for 30, 40 minutes waiting on this to happen. And so the currents that are gonna be experienced in the harbor are unlike any that happen regularly. So there's gonna be scouring of the seafloor. It's gonna bring a lot of material in with just the water. So not only sediments from the seafloor, but cars and trash and floating connexes and fuel tanks. This tsunami water is completely unnavigable. If it is ankle deep, you cannot go through it. It's gonna be full of glass, it's gonna have junk in it. Most of the minor injuries that people survive in tsunamis like this are serious lacerations. They got all cut up because they tried to walk through the water. You cannot swim in this, and the currents are such that you cannot really navigate your boat like you're used to doing. And so that's really the main point that everyone should know, is that no amount of tsunami water is navigable on foot or by boat. And ideally, at this point, you've had the natural warning signs of the huge earthquake. You've heard your sirens go off. You should be nowhere near the water so that you don't have to worry about it. But we know that there's gonna be issues. There's gonna be people who are not getting the warnings, not listening to the warnings, or not able to travel. So that's why a community approach to response to this is really important, because some people are gonna need help to evacuate when it happens. So this goes on for a long time. The water comes up for about 45 minutes, and then it stands at a high stand for 10 or 15 minutes. And then it all goes out at about the same pace. So 45 minutes to an hour of all this water receding. And it's not just water, it's homes and cars and junk being dragged across, like your main roads and stuff. So the cycle of waves in a tsunami is not a single wave. It's a cycle that can continue for up to a day or more. And so if something like this were to happen, worst case scenario, the first wave may come and go, but it may not be the biggest wave. The biggest wave could come 6 hours later when the tide is naturally higher. And so a lot of dynamics are gonna play into when the biggest wave gets here and how long after that earthquake it actually arrives. And so it's important to know the regular dynamics of the ocean and then what we think the worst case scenario could be. Thankfully, for all of the models that we use in our hazard reports, we model the tsunami wave on top of the mean high water line to begin with. So we take a conservative approach. We say, well, the conditions in the regular ocean are as bad as they should be, and then we add a tsunami on top of that. So if this were to happen at a super low tide, you might not even notice. It just depends on what's going on out there. And then I'm going to show you one sequence and then hand it over. This is from Japan, where they have the most heavily instrumented subduction zone in the world. They are far ahead of us in terms of seafloor instrumentation, instrumentation on land. And what we're going to look at is a sequence of earthquakes. Size of the circle is the magnitude of the earthquake. The steepness of that line is how far down in the earth the earthquakes occur. It's not super important, but if you wanted to get into the technical details, the steepness of that line is going to describe again that there's a subduction or subducting plate going beneath Japan. And so I have until March 11th to talk. It's January 1st or 7th. We're flying through the days here, and this is regular tectonic activity on a subduction zone around the Pacific. We experience the same stuff in the Aleutians and South Central. These are 2, 3s, and 4s magnitude earthquakes that don't cause damage that you're used to feeling, or you don't feel them at all because you're desensitized to them. Down here is the cumulative count of earthquakes since the beginning of the animation, and we'll see that it's going to skyrocket. On March 10th or 11th, there's a foreshock. So every earthquake that we have has a 5% chance of being a foreshock. We don't know that an earthquake is a foreshock until it's followed by a bigger earthquake. And so every moderate or larger earthquake, so every magnitude 7 or more, there's always a 5% chance that it could lead to a bigger earthquake. This slope of the line is the rate of background seismicity. So once this happens, we'll see that the rate changes dramatically. There's a foreshock, and then a serious set of aftershocks and a skyrocketing rate of earthquakes. And so if we have a major 1964 style earthquake in Prince William Sound or in Southeast Alaska or in the Aleutians, there will be thousands and thousands of aftershocks. Many of them, hundreds of them, will be significant in the 5 to 7 range. And so this is what we expect. Earthquake aftershocks after major events can last for years. And so even with moderate earthquakes like Anchorage in 2018, the magnitude 7.1, there were months of earthquakes that really caused people a lot of stress. And so that's something that people need to be aware of. If there's damage in an initial earthquake and homes are unsafe, it's important to designate those homes as unsafe because of aftershock could cause a collapse or additional damage. So these earthquake sequences are really common, and we look at the slope of this line so that we know when do we start calling these regular earthquakes again? How long are they aftershocks? And these are aftershocks, basically, until the slope of this line goes back to the slope it was before the main shock. And so in the case of Tohoku, I think it was about 3 years before the aftershock activity died down and they went back to regular background seismicity. But we know if something like 1964 happened again, it'll be years of big earthquakes. So what do we do if there's a big earthquake? In this room or anywhere you are, you should drop, cover, and hold on, because things are gonna come down from the ceiling, and this table is stronger than your back. So we wanna drop, cover, and hold during the earthquake shaking. And then after the earthquake shaking, we go to high ground. And Elena is gonna talk more about the modeling we've done and the hazard for this community. Since this is here, I will point it out, but I'm gonna hand that to Elena. Strong ground motion in an earthquake is gonna cause a lot of secondary effects. So that's landslides, that's avalanches, that's liquefaction and lateral spread, and maybe even submarine landslides that you can't see. So we know that those heavy accelerations are gonna cause problems. And what we also know is that the type of geologic substrate that you're on will affect how you perceive that earthquake. So how intense is the shaking? So this diagram illustrates in a cartoon way that this squiggly line is earthquake energy. And as it travels through bedrock, as it travels through bedrock, it's moving quickly. But when it hits unconsolidated sediments like sand, or it hits saturated sediments, so sediments with a lot of water in them, we slow down that earthquake energy as it's moving from point A to point B. If you slow that earthquake energy down, the energy cannot disappear. It is translated into more intense shaking. And so you probably heard folks refer to Anchorage as it being in a bowl, or the Los Angeles basin is in a bowl. What that means is it's a catchment for sediments. So it is literally like a bowl of sediments, but the sediments are loose, they're not hard rock, and they're saturated with water. So if you imagine a bowl of gravel versus a bowl of jello, if you shake the bowl of gravel, as soon as you're done shaking it, it's done jiggling. But the jello, if you shake that, it's gonna slosh back and forth, and you get amplification of the seismic energy in those materials that slow down the earthquake energy. And so here at the coastline, you may have liquefaction or subsidence or settling in the near coastal areas, things like landslides in the upper catchments and things like that. So in Anchorage in 2018, this is why some neighborhoods were fine. And then right next door, that neighborhood that was built on an old swamp, they put a bunch of sand in it and built homes on it, were pretty heavily affected. It's because one neighborhood was on bedrock and the earthquake energy went through there and just left everything as it was. But the other neighborhood was built on a bowl of soup and it shook a lot harder because that energy was amplified. So you may not experience what your friends experience next door, even depending on how your house was built or what it was built on. And with that, I'll get Elena's presentation ready, unless there are any other questions. Yeah.
Questions?
Okay, I stuck to my 30-minute limit.
Thank you, Bert.
You have to do the same now.
I'll try, but yeah.
Can you click it? Does it work for you? It didn't work for me, so I'll click it if
Really?
you want, or you sit here.
Okay, I'll just hold it here. So,
Oh, on the microphone.
yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. So we have the great introduction about like how earthquakes happen and how they make tsunamis. Now what's next? Like what do we do with that, right? And here in Alaska, it's a really big question because we produce tsunamis here in Alaska. And unfortunately for us, we are talking about minutes, yes?
Can you pull the mic just a little bit closer to the
Oh, okay. Like this?
Yeah.
So, for us, unfortunately, we don't have that luxury of several hours of tsunami warning like the low 48 have. when tsunamis is made in Alaska, so we have minutes. So let's look at those two photos, and do you see something common in those photos? Like everything is common, right? Pretty much it's the exact copy. So Kodiak in 1964, Ishinomaki City in 2011 in Japan, it's the same thing, pretty much boats sticking into the buildings, kind of ending up in the middle of the street somewhere. And the question is like, can we do anything about that? The nature will be making the same stuff again and again and again, because the nature doesn't know how far advanced we are in our technology, in our understanding of anything. It will keep making those tsunamis, right? So the only thing we can do to kind of to be alive is to learn as much as we can and to know exactly what to do next time, right when it happens. So let's see. Let's move. Okay, let's do this. Oh. Okay, let's. I'll do it click here, okay. Oh. So, this is for you guys. Select, we need to select all images that are not tsunami sources. Things that cannot make tsunamis. Okay, I'm ready to hear what you think.
Number three.
Yes, thank you. Number 3 is good. Okay, what else?
Number 7.
Perfect. It's a submarine not big enough to make a tsunami. Okay, what else? 2 more left.
5 is a huge weather front.
Oh. Fine.
Yeah.
5 is tricky. I will talk about that a little bit later. Let's have another one.
2.
One more left.
2.
No,
No, two
No.
that are comet or,
it's meteorite.
okay.
It's the one that killed the dinosaurs. Because the
Okay, that-
tsunami, okay,
definitely
yeah.
comet.
One more left that cannot make a tsunami. Look carefully. 9, thank you. Okay, let's go one by one. Number 1, underwater earthquake in the Gulf of Alaska. Of course it can make a tsunami. It's done it many times. Number 2, meteorite dropping in the middle of the ocean. Totally can make a tsunami. It will be mega tsunami. Everybody will be gone, right? Number 3, tornado cannot make a tsunami. Why? Because it happens on land, right? You cannot make tsunami on land. Number 4, underwater landslide. Of course, it can make a tsunami. Number 5 is tricky. It's called meteor tsunami. It happens when you have a storm moving for a long time over a large body of water. Meteor tsunamis happen in the Gulf of Mexico, which is now Gulf of America, right? They happen in the big lakes. They happen in the Mediterranean a lot. So yes, it's a meteor tsunami, which is a separate kind of type of tsunamis. Number 6, explosion of the volcano, which is on the island. Of course, like the largest number of fatalities before the 2004 Indonesian tsunami happened also in Indonesia in 1883, when Krakatoa eruption happened and 33,000 people died in that tsunami, right? Number 7, no. Number 8, it's a landslide above the water that enters the water. For example, it can happen here in that lake, right? If a chunk of mountain drops into the lake, it will be a tsunami. And of course, number 9, it's the earthquake that happens on land. It cannot make a tsunami. We can proceed. So, there is a quote. A tsunami can happen anytime, next month, tomorrow. There is a whole generation of people that have grown up without having seen anyone killed by a tsunami, without having to pull dead bodies out of bushes around here, without seeing 80-foot boats that have gone through their living rooms. People tend to forget. This is from Bruce Turner, who used to be a scientist at the National Tsunami Warning Center. And I started working with him in late 90s to make tsunami maps for the state of Alaska. And this is like the largest problem of all in the tsunami. People tend to forget. We had several survivors of the 1964 tsunami in Alaska left, right? And they tell me like tragic stories about, what happened in Seward and Kodiak, Valdez, Whittier, Cordova, Chiniga. People died because nobody had an idea what to do when the ground starts shaking. And this is what we need to do. We need to teach our students, our children, to know, because maybe it's not going to happen in their lifetime, but it will totally happen in their children and grandchildren lifetime. So yeah, so this is about learning the lessons. Look at this: Indonesia, 61, 83, 99, and how many people died, right? Japan also horrible history. Alaska, not that much, right? Even though both those earthquakes were huge, generated horrible tsunamis, but because population of Alaska was tiny in 1964, like the number of fatalities, of course, not comparable to other places. But look, in terms of lessons, what happened? Both tsunamis in Alaska, 1946 and 64, resulted in creation of the tsunami warning centers. This one gave life to the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Hawaii, and the 64, the Alaska Regional Tsunami Warning System, which is in Palmer, right? And then what happened in Indonesia was absolutely astonishing, because regardless of all these events, people had no idea what's happening, right? Nobody ever told them in 2004, those children who ran to the water to see what happened when the water went away, right? Nobody told them about that sign. It's the most important tsunami warning sign, when the water goes away for no reason, right? You need to run. They didn't know, and they had all these events before. So there was no transfer of knowledge between the generations. But in United States, we've got that Tsunami Warning and Education Act that became a public law. And because of that, we had that, until now, we had that line in the budget that said that National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program should have so much money every year, to prepare population for the next tsunami. But the tragic event in Japan, it was totally unbearable, because it was the nation that was most prepared for tsunamis in the world. They do regularly like tsunami drills. They know how to evacuate. They know where to evacuate. But still, the number of fatalities was unbelievable, and I will talk why. I mean, there are many different reasons, but this earthquake changed our understanding together with this one. Both events changed our understanding of like how tsunamis can be produced and how large they could be. So I put the take-home things at the beginning in case people like fall asleep, get hungry, and leave. So you have your take-home points. So those two tsunami disasters in Indian Ocean and Japan, 2004 and 2011, they showed that the magnitude 9 earthquake has a global reach. It's not affecting just the country where it happened. It can be it can kill people around the world. And for example, for me, it was so hard to learn that 360 people, 360 tourists from Sweden died in Thailand the day after Christmas in tsunami, because in Sweden, there are no tsunamis in Sweden, right? No earthquakes, no volcanoes, nothing in terms of natural disasters happen in Sweden. And they, of course, they had no idea what to do when they saw the water going away. And 360 people for that small country, it's a huge percentage of population. It was like a national loss, right? And it could be prevented just with basic kind of education. Alaska is the biggest tsunami producer in the United States, of course, but for us, it means that those waves will arrive to our coastline with very little time for official warning. And that's why knowing what to do rather than waiting for authorities to tell you what to do. Yes.
Keep going. I gotta mess with this notch here.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically the difference is like the difference, between life and death, pretty much. So you either wait for someone to tell you what to do, or you know exactly what to do at 2 a.m. when you have a tsunami siren, you know how to evacuate, you know where your passport is, you know where your emergency supply is, right? So that's why we are here. That's why we make those tsunami brochures for community, that they start asking those questions and they start thinking what's missing here, like how can we improve our tsunami preparedness. And this is like again the most important thing. They are rare, right? Like bad tsunamis are rare. It's important to keep talking about them. It's important to keep talking, to children about them, and kind of imprint that kind of image in their brains that when they are at the coastline, look around, see where the exit is, right? See how you're going to evacuate anywhere in the world. They will travel, right? They will go on vacation to Maldives, to India, or Thailand, or you name it, right? Mexico, everywhere. They need to find out first how to evacuate from that coastline. So, like, let's see what's happening in Alaska, why it's so bad in terms of tsunamis. We have two major factors that contribute to what we call near field tsunami hazard. Near field means we are sitting on top of it, right? It's not somewhere like far away like Japan, even though like Japan can make a big problem for us, and I will show you later. But we don't even need Japan. We have our own production mechanism of tsunamis, and this is the seismically active subduction zone, what Barrett showed as the, very, I think beautiful art of doing that motion. And we have glacial fjords, unfortunately. And glacial fjords means that they bring the sediment into the fjords, the glaciers, glacial rivers, and that sediment they accumulate on the steep underwater slopes. And when it starts shaking, they kind of go as an underwater landslide. And this is exactly what killed people in 1964 in Sur, Valdez, and Whittier. People died within like 2 to 3 minutes after the first shock. And that big wave from the Gulf of Alaska hasn't even arrived. People died from local underwater landslides. So look at this. Everything started in the United States from that tsunami that reached Hilo, Alaska, 5 hours after the earthquake in the Aleutian Islands. 159 people died in Hilo, Alaska, for the same exact reason. Nice, beautiful day in Hilo Harbor, and then the water goes away. And then like lots of seafloor is exposed, and everybody looks at the seafloor, like what's happening there? They lost the precious 15 minutes, right? Because the next thing they saw was the wall of water. You couldn't run away from it. That's it. So 1964, great earthquake. 92% of people who died from tsunamis in that earthquake. But what's interesting, 76% of all fatalities were due to local landslide tsunamis in Alaska. So those landslide tsunamis that happened because of the glacial fjords bringing that sediment into the base. Look at that. In Southeast Alaska, we had the world record of the wave in Lituya Bay, 24 meters, times 3, 1,700 feet splash. This is higher than the Empire State Building. But in the same exact place, it's not like the single event. It keeps happening because it just it's the nature. The sediment keeps bringing up and the glaciers keep retreating, and that causes all these collapses. Same thing happened in exactly the same spot, 149 meters, so times 3, 450 feet splash. Then, just recently, Tam Fjord in 2015, 193 meters, so pretty much 600 feet wave height. It's like, I can't even imagine that, right? I've seen Empire State Building, but one thing is the building, another thing is the wave height. I mean, if you have a minute, read that story about those father and son that survived that wave. They were on a boat. Oh my goodness. You know what they said? Because your brain cannot like comprehend that wave height, right? and they thought it was the glacier that started moving towards them, because that water was covered by ice, right? And they thought it's the glacier that's moving. So your brain offers like some reasonable substitution for something that you cannot kind of process. So same thing happened to people in Sri Lanka in 2004. The woman said when that wall of like dark gray water started moving from the ocean, she thought it's the gods were really mad at them, and the gods started moving the mountains. So she thought it's the mountains moving towards her, because again, her brain could not process the fact that the water can be so high. So this is how like it does tricks. And finally, of course, you've heard about Barry Arm, right? The discovery of the Barry Arm slide that's sitting there, and like huge amount of rock can drop anytime, and but it's being monitored, so we will know when it starts moving, right? So why I chose to study tsunami waves back in Russia in 1986? So first of all, the good thing about them that even though earthquakes cannot be predicted, right? But once tsunami is produced, you can totally calculate and forecast where the impact is going to be and how quickly it will arrive to any kind of part of the coastline. This is the beauty. It's called modeling. With models, now, I can run the model for the earthquake that happened anywhere in the Pacific. And like in under, 15 minutes, I know where exactly like it will be the worst case scenario along the coast, right? So it's good. So we can do that. And another thing is that because of that, we can save lives. We can educate people, we can issue tsunami warnings and so on. So we can do something about that. But one of the major reasons, like the ocean waves were so much easier to visualize. Like I studied all different types of waves, including acoustic waves, electromagnetic waves, optic waves, everything. And waves in plasma, waves in ionosphere, right? Like aurora, for example, right? These are ionospheric waves. And pretty much equations are more or less the same, but at least I could visualize the ocean waves. Everybody kind of knows how ocean waves look like. So that's why I thought, okay, tsunamis, why not? And also relatively simple mathematical equations for tsunami waves. And it's because of the fact that Barrett already mentioned that the tsunami energy goes all the way from the surface to the bottom. It's like the entire ocean is kind of moving like that. So it's not just the wind waves that we observe here, right, on the water. Basically, if you dive underneath like the normal storm, it will be quiet down there. Tsunamis, it's not, like it's all the way to the bottom. And because of this fact, equations get much simpler. And that's why we can calculate so quickly where they propagate. So, like, who knows what tsunami means? Barrett, I know that you know. Yeah. Okay, no, aha,
Big wave.
50% correct, okay.
Wait.
Yeah, I say 50, you see two characters, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, let me show you.
No.
So,
Where?
harbor waves. It's two Japanese characters, Tsu and Nami, harbor waves. So the next question is why harbor wave, right? Because we think about tsunamis as something big coming from the open ocean. What about harbor? It's because in Japan, they have like a huge history of tsunamis. In Japan, a long time ago, without, any scientific understanding of what was happening, fishermen would go out to the open ocean from their little harbor like this, right? And they go in this ship out and they get their fish and they come home and this is what they see in their harbor. Like everything was fine out there, beautiful day, nothing happening. And then this is what they saw. And they thought that there is like the monster in the harbor, something happened in the harbor. And that's why they call it harbor wave. Because they didn't know that in the open ocean, tsunami is pretty much invisible. You can be sitting on top of a tsunami in the middle of the Pacific, and it will propagate underneath you. And in fact, I've spoken to a former naval officer who was on a ship in 1957 in the middle of the Pacific when the huge tsunami was generated in the Aleutian Islands, huge one, 8.9 magnitude. And the captain got the warning because it was 57, it was already after the tsunami warning center was established in Palmer. And the captain got the warning and the captain said, oh, what do I do? And the guy had a geology degree. He said, don't you worry, you need to do nothing because for us, it's invisible. It will just pass underneath. We won't even notice that. Why? I will tell you why. This is the thing to remember. Please remember the title because I will be asking questions at the end. So, first of all, let's look at the sketch. So of course it's not to the scale. Look at that. We have tsunami, we have one crest, another crest, and the trough, right? Just like normal wave. And this is the ocean depth. And in the deep ocean, if you look at that, the distance between the crests, we call it wavelength. In the deep ocean, the wavelength, let's say about 60 miles. The ocean depth is about 3 miles. And then the crest height is about 1 foot. Now think about it. You are sitting here somewhere. So one crest is to the right from you, like 30 miles away. Another crest is 30 miles to the left from you, right? And the height of that crest, 1 foot. The question is, can you see that? No, you cannot see that. And the depth is only 3 miles. So that's why they call them lone waves, because the wavelength, the distance between the crest, is much, much larger than the ocean depth. If you kind of want to visualize that, imagine your bathtub, right? And put some like about 4 inches of water in your bathtub. So basically on each wall, there will be a crest. And then you can kind of move like something in the middle and just push the water. And this is going to be your tsunami, right? So it's pretty much shallow, very shallow water compared to the distance between two crests. And the important thing that kind of defines tsunami, that the speed only depends on the depth. It's pretty much square root of gravity, which is constant, right? Gravitational constant, and the depth of the ocean. So, which means the deeper the water, the faster the wave, right? Okay, we will remember that. Yeah. So I initially I called them interesting facts, but they're actually not just interesting. They are so crucial because, you know, if you understand how it behaves, it will help you to be alive next time. So first of all, it's a series of waves, which means that it will be happening for at least 12 hours or probably 24 hours. Like on that video from Japan, it just slowly goes up like for 45 minutes and then it goes down. And then it happens again and again. In 1964, Kodiak has had 5 large waves in the first, I think, 10 hours after the earthquake. Valdez, the largest wave came to Valdez around 11 p.m., right? And the earthquake was at 5:30 p.m. So it's a long process. And because of that, you need to be stayed away until it's all clear, like official all clear, right? Or like 12 to 24 hours if you don't have anyone to tell you what to do. Tsunamis can be generated by underwater volcanic eruptions, landslides, asteroids. We looked at that picture at the beginning. And this is important. You know, everybody knows that by now that tsunamis are not tidal waves, but believe me, like back in 64, many publications still called them tidal waves. So it's just very recent knowledge. And this is important. They are very different from wind waves. I already mentioned that. Wind waves are short waves, meaning the distance between crests, then you can see the distance between crests, right? You just watch them coming in and you can see first crest, second crest, right, and so on. And tsunami waves, they reach all the way to the ocean bottom. The energy goes all the way to the bottom. And because of that beautiful property, we can detect them in the open ocean. Like in the middle of the ocean, we can drop an instrument on the bottom, and that instrument will detect a tsunami coming from Japan, from Kamchatka, from Kerma-Tectonic Trench down there, from Australia, from Chile, from anywhere, right? This is because of that property of tsunamis. The energy goes all the way to the bottom. So there are three stages in the life of a tsunami. First, you produce a tsunami like by underwater earthquake or eruption or something. Then second stage, tsunami travels in deep ocean. And this is the best studied part of tsunami life. So this is so simple, so easy to calculate. Equations are simple, numerical modeling gets you there like in several minutes on a regular laptop, right? Very easy. And finally, it's the bad part that happens when tsunami hits land. And we will see how that invisible monster in the deep ocean becomes so visible and destructive when it hits land. Like what happens? Let's say we start here. We are here on that boat in the middle of the ocean, and tsunami goes underneath at about 500 miles per hour. Why so fast? Remind me.
Deeper the water.
The deeper the water. In the deep ocean, it's fast. It's like Boeing 747. Guess what? How much time do you need to fly from Anchorage to Hawaii? 5.5 hours, right? It's exactly how much time it takes tsunami to get from Alaska, from Aleutian Islands to Hawaii, about 6 hours. So tsunami is not dangerous in deep water, but you remember April 1st, 1946. This is how tsunami warning system started in the United States. 5 hours after the tsunami, after the earthquake, and 2,500 miles away from the Aleutian earthquake, this is Hilo Harbor. Invisible, nobody expected anything. The only thing people saw water going away for no reason, which means run, right? No, nobody knew that. So, tsunami transport huge amount of energy far away from the earthquake. So imagine that if the energy goes all the way to the bottom, right? Imagine how much you can store in the ocean, and it just goes through the ocean, like just like that. And this is the animation that we made, and we tried to illustrate that concept. And you can see, like for yourself, if we succeeded. But let me show you how it works. So basically, it's the energy, right? You see how it's like everywhere. It's not just like ripple at the surface, it's all the way to the bottom. And that's why we can drop those instruments, and they are called DARTs, Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis. Every triangle here is that instrument. And they belong to different countries. So United States owns the blue ones, and they are, of course, along the Alaska Pollution Subduction Zone, because we produce tsunamis in Alaska, right? And of course, like here, so that we know what's happening in Japan, one here and one here along the, Chile and Central America. So let me show how it works. So there is a ship that comes and drops that instrument at the bottom. And then there is a buoy at the surface. Let's just start it, and you will see the tabletop. Okay, the ship, the installation. Okay, the buoy, surface buoy, and then this is the instrument, right? And then earthquake happens. And then the wave comes. Yeah, the wave comes, and this thing, it senses the wave, sends the signal to the buoy. The buoy sends the signal to the satellite, and the satellite sends the signal to tsunami warning centers. So this is how it works. Who knows what kind of wave that device sends to the buoy? who knows, like what kind of waves exist in this world? Yes. Yeah, this is not the wave, it's not, yeah, so this is the called so-called acoustic wave or sound wave, right? I speak now, you hear me. Why do you hear me? Because I produce sound waves, and sound waves propagate in the water. And this is how submarines talk to each other. Sound waves, right? Acoustic waves or sound waves. Guess what? Because the waves that our cell phones use, what kind of waves do they use? Radio waves or electromagnetic waves. Unfortunately, they don't propagate in water. That's why these are sound waves. So these are sound waves, and from the buoy to satellite, of course, we use these waves, electromagnetic waves. And the satellite sends the waves to tsunami warning centers, so also like electromagnetic waves. And this is how we know that tsunami is being generated. Okay, so what happens when tsunami hits land? Like why becomes like so dangerous? Look at that. So in the open ocean, it's still deep. The distance between crests is still like 130 miles and or so. And now we get into the shallow water. So the first thing what happens, the wave slows down. Why?
That is still showered.
The title, you remember? The title.
They got it.
Yeah, good. Just make sure. Yeah, okay, so the deeper the water, the faster the wave, which means when it's shallow, it slows down. It's like a bulldozer, right? It slows down. Then, at the same time, what happens to the energy? You remember Barrett said that energy doesn't disappear, right? Energy is still there. But imagine that energy was kind of distributed in that depth to 2.5 miles. Now the depth is like 30 feet. And the energy is there. The question is, where does the energy go?
So that,
It goes up because it cannot go into the sea floor, right? It cannot go into the sand or whatever. It goes up. And then because of that, the wave height goes up like crazy. So this is why. So this is the animation that we made before the 2004 tsunami in Indonesia. And that tsunami changed everybody's perspective because it was the first tsunami when people had cameras. Like people had actual recordings, video recordings of tsunami. I bet nobody heard about 1998 tsunami in Papua New Guinea. Have you heard about that tsunami? No, because people, like nobody had cameras back then in Papua New Guinea. 2,000 people died in one day. And like, it's not impressive when you just read in the news, right? But when you see those photos or videos of those tourists taking pictures of that horrible, wall of water coming from the ocean, and you see the people who already kind of pretty much dead because they will not have time to escape. This is very impactful, right? And this animation was made before that, so we wanted to illustrate that most important tsunami warning sign when, like in the generic Alaska town, right? And when you see water going away like that, so this is what you do, right? Immediately you evacuate. If not it's not the time for extreme low tide, right? Nothing is happening. You just see that water going away. Even if you don't feel any shaking, right? It's still your most important tsunami warning sign. Like people in Thailand, they didn't feel any shaking, right? Or well, some shaking. I mean, not strong, obviously, right? But this was the only thing they could react upon, but they didn't. So the important thing that I need to kind of indicate that when tsunami hits land, it stops being a wave. It is a wave in the open ocean. Even then, it's kind of questionable because you don't see it, right? Like what kind of wave it is if it's like 1 feet 30 miles to the right and 1 foot like 30 miles to the left, right? So when it hits land, it's just the ugly sea of debris. Horrible, horrible stuff. So this is how real tsunami hits land. And this is the Japanese, is it going anywhere? Oh, it's not going anywhere. Okay,
Oh, you can take that at full screen and hit play and then
okay, let's try it.
hit play right there.
Oh, it's because it's BC. Okay, got it. Yeah. Sorry. So how do we convert? Okay. Anyway, it's pretty dramatic because what happens in no time, those buildings are gone completely because the force from, you remember in that video that it just keeps coming. And when it keeps coming, all that stuff becomes like floating debris and it keeps pushing it. So let's go. So what happened? You remember I said that 19,000 people that died in Japan, it was so tragic because it was the nation most prepared for the tsunami. But unfortunately, they underestimated the size of the earthquake and they underestimated how much uplift of the seafloor can happen. And because of that, all the tsunami maps that they made were kind of not right, pretty much. And in this little town, uh, the pink kind of area is how far tsunami traveled. And you can see that in that point, A, they had a disaster management building, which means that in their tsunami map, that was a safe zone because you don't build a tsunami, I mean, the disaster management building in the inundation zone, right? It was miscalculated so much, and the people who were supposed to manage the disaster, right? They kind of died pretty quickly in that building. And another place here, which I need to mention, is that so-called vertical tsunami evacuation victim. And they are in many, many places in Japan, which means that you can evacuate vertically instead of evacuating away from the sea, because sometimes you just don't have enough time to get to high ground. Like for you guys, you are lucky, your high ground is pretty much here, right? You know, people who like fortunate enough to, you know, to be able to run or walk, you can evacuate on feet to high ground. In many places, it's flat for miles, like in Indonesia, flat for 5 miles, and there is no high ground. So what do? You evacuate vertically. So they build those reinforced concrete building, and this is the international sign for vertical tsunami evacuation. And in Alaska, there are several locations that desperately need vertical tsunami evacuation structure, including Homer Spit, Seward, and other places where you just don't have time to evacuate. And so look at that. So this is the height of the seawall. You remember that seawall that was overtopped, right? And this is how high the water was in this tsunami. So basically it means that people who went to the roof, they were okay in this event. But this is how the seawall was underestimated in terms of the height. And that was the level of water up to that floor. So this is so-called the energy map. So this is the Japanese tsunami source. It happened there, and the colors represent the wave height or the energy for the total time of tsunami propagation. So you can see how complex that pattern is, right? It's not like uniformly kind of distributed, it's not like circles, right? And again, the beauty of numerical modeling is that you can make all kinds of experiments. So one day I decided to see what happens if I make Pacific Ocean flat. Like the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, I made it just flat, one depth everywhere. And I made a tsunami somewhere like in Japan, and it was just perfect circles, like perfect circles. But it's not like, it's not real, right? The Pacific, bottom of the Pacific has all kinds of stuff. The mountains, you know, the deeper part, the shallow part. That's why the energy goes like that. And look at that interesting thing. You know what's here? Crescent City. Crescent City, California is a very unfortunate place. They are pretty much doomed. Every tsunami, yeah, I'm serious, every tsunami coming from anywhere hits Crescent City so hard compared to any other place on the West Coast that at some point scientists say, like, what's happening? Like, why? And first of all, you see that thing here, like the energy goes this way, and then all of a sudden it's like going there. There is a mountain ridge here, and that mountain ridge refracts energy into that direction. Another feature here next to Crescent City is a fault. What's the name of that? Mendocino, right? Mendocino fracture zone. Yeah, there is a fault, yeah, triple junction, where one side is so much shallower than the other side. And you remember when it's deep, it's one speed, like it moves faster on deeper part and like slow on the shallow part, and the refraction happens. That part gets moving faster and then turns. And this is why Crescent City gets that energy here. And you see what happened to Crescent City? Just imagine 10 hours after the earthquake in Japan, about 5,000 miles. The water height was 8 feet, currents were 10 knots. It was totally, like total mess in the harbor. The harbor, like millions of dollars, everything was destroyed. And it's not that, like, it's not extremely high wave, right? But the, the most tragic thing is like 3 kids, high school kids, decided to go to the harbor. And there were multiple warnings. Please don't go to the harbor. Don't go to the water. Stay away from the water. No, they went to the water and they took pictures, and one of them died. And when I give lectures to school kids, I ask them, like, how stupid do you need to be to die in your hometown from an earthquake that happens 5,000 miles away 10 hours ago, right? In 10 hours, you can evacuate, right? I mean, you can evacuate in 15 minutes. You just don't go to the harbor, right? And you don't die. No, it's like you need to educate people like that. So the damage was, of course, dramatic. This is another example of people not listening to tsunami warnings, and this is the, what's the name of that place? Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So in that case, it's a video. The wave was about 2 feet, and you can see what happens. So you just watch that kind of horizon here, and you will see, like, barely see that wave coming in, but it will be visible. And people, of course, came to the harbor, and one lady was so proud that she came to the harbor to watch that wave. So let's see.
Yeah, this is not the first wave,
It's not even the first wave. It's like, yeah, so this is like, you see 2 feet. Yeah, and this is what it does. And it's barely even visible, right? My question, why? And you know why, because we've talked about that. Why is it so destructive, that 2 feet?
Energy goes out of shallow.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I know better that you know.
Energy has to go up because it can't go down. And
Thank
energy
you.
can't just dissipate, it's gotta go somewhere.
Yes, so the answer is, it's because it's not 2 feet at the top. It's 2 feet and the entire depth of that channel. It's like the whole channel goes like that, and you can see only those 2 feet, but it's like the whole channel produces that energy. It's like a bulldozer. That's why those boats go upside down. Yeah, so this is the kind of the energy. So what the lessons from those disasters? Except for the science lessons that we learned, that earthquakes can be so different from what we thought before, right? And the lessons are like that. So in Indian Ocean, the earthquake occurred where the event of that magnitude was not expected. And unfortunately, tsunami warning system didn't exist in Indian Ocean back then. And because of that, people died in, like, for example, Somalia, 7.5 hours after the earthquake. this is totally unacceptable, because in 7.5 hours you can evacuate, you can fly to Europe, you can fly to a different country, right? You have time, but there was no warning. People had no idea what's happening in the Indian Ocean. And again, the response of local residents and tourists in 2004 was shocking. Media has failed to reach the public worldwide with stories and photos from 15 tsunamis that happened around the world since 1992. 15 tsunamis from 1992, all of them were deadly, like one of them in 98 killed 2,000 people. I bet you've never heard about them, right? And because it was not just like media thought it's not important. So, and then in Tahoku, the large amount of the uplift on the ocean floor caused that number of fatalities, and as a result, that inadequate tsunami hazard maps. Tsunami hazard maps were underestimating the hazard, pretty much. See, because of that, the seawalls were not high enough, and people had what's called false sense of security. They thought that they are in a safe zone, they were not in a safe zone. That's why when people say, oh, your kind of imagination is pretty wild when you make those scenarios for Alaska. I'm like, no, no, I can't even get to the point where I can predict something that will happen next time. I don't have enough imagination, unfortunately, to think about that. So the lesson, at least my lesson, it's lesson in humility. We don't know everything. Believe me, the next earthquake and the next tsunami will give us completely different lessons. We will learn something else because of that, right? And just, be prepared, be humble. Know that the nature doesn't know about our understanding or advances. Yeah, we need to be prepared. As simple as that. So as Barrett mentioned, in 1964, the area of ground deformation in Alaska was huge. You remember how in the news they showed the pulsating kind of earthquake epicenter as a dot, like red dot goes like boom, 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 boom. It's not a dot. It's that entire area that we call rupture, meaning like ground deformation. That area went up, it was uplift, and that area went down. So you happen to be, Cordova is here, it's in the uplift area. But the majority of Alaska actually went down. Majority of Alaska subsided, and that's why you see dead trees along many coastlines. It's because when it dropped, right, the high tides keep flooding that area and the trees die. So people died in Alaska, British Columbia, Oregon, California, and there were many different tsunamis, including the tectonic tsunami, landslide tsunami, and seiches, which is like splashes in the lakes, like Kenai Lake had a big splash. And the strong ground shaking was lasting for 4 minutes. And this is absolutely hard to imagine because while the ground was still shaking, in 2 minutes, first wave came to Seward from landslide, from underwater landslide. And people still had problems standing up, right? And the wave came and oil tanks exploded and it was the fire covered. The water was covered with burning oil and so on. So it's just a chain reaction of events. So, and this is the tsunami, 64 tsunami propagating across the Pacific. I hope it plays. Yes, look at the where the energy goes. So the colors are energy. Think about the energy distribution and think about the what you see about the speed of tsunami in different parts of the ocean, and see if you can tell me anything about that. There's two things: the energy and the speed. Do you see anything interesting?
Yes.
It seems to be on keeps to the east side.
Yeah, you see that there is a kind of preferential distribution of energy, right? It's not like equally distributed like in beautiful circles, no. That's correct. Okay, what about the speed? Let's play the game. Watch the speed in different parts of the ocean.
As it gets deeper, it goes faster.
Look at that, so it's, the total time is 6 hours. By 5:30, it hits Hawaii, and look where it is in Bering Sea. It's not even halfway through the Bering Sea. You see that shelf? It gets very shallow, and when it hits that boundary, it slows down like crazy, right? It's again, the deeper the water, the faster the wave. So basically, it means that people here on the west coast of Alaska, they are pretty safe. They have lots of time. Because when the wave hits the shelf, it slows down. They have time. It's like it's already past Hawaii. And about energy, yeah. So energy in tsunami propagates perpendicular to the tsunami source. So this is the first paper I read about tsunamis, written by a Japanese professor Kajiura. And it's called Energy of a Tsunami. And if this is your tsunami source, the 1964, so this is your energy. For example, if I tell you that tomorrow we will have earthquake in the Western Aleutian Islands, the big earthquake that will generate a tsunami here, are you okay in Cordova? Are you safe? Yep, because the energy will go this way. It will go, if the source is here,
Oh, perfect.
the energy will go perpendicular. If the earthquake is here, the energy will go this way. It just happened that the 1964 source was here and the energy went to the west coast. If you move it slightly here, it will go this way, right? So it's just easy to remember, perpendicular. This is just, how 1964 tsunami looks in real life. So you can see how complex it is. And could you guess what determines that kind of complex pattern of tsunami?
The shape of the ocean bottom.
Thank you. Perfect, yeah. It is so complex because the ocean bottom is not flat. If it's flat, it will be nice circles, like going like that. Like when you drop a rock in the pond, right? You see perfect circles. It will be like that, but no, we have very complicated ocean bottom in here, and that's why it's so complex. Just to, and this is why I like modeling, because you can see exactly how it happens. And when people in places like when they have a narrow bay, for example, King Cove, right? The King Cove is inside the bay, and at the entrance to that bay, there is an island. And they say, oh, this island will protect us. I'm so sorry, it's not going to protect you because this is how it behaves. Tsunami doesn't even feel that island, it doesn't even know. So basically, the energy kind of goes like that, and the island is sticking there just like a toothpick. It's invisible for tsunamis, right? No, the island at the head of the bay will not protect you from tsunamis. So again, kind of a summary. So the tsunami header is high in Alaska due to active subduction zone and glacial fjords. And because we all live pretty much on top of that, the proximity of large earthquake ruptures to the coastal population in Alaska. Bad place to be, what can I say? So Great Alaska earthquake, the majority of people, died from local landslide tsunamis. And we are the biggest producer, and that's why, we have little time for official warning, and knowing what to do basically will make a difference. And this is the story that was so fascinating that I know it's 8, oh my gosh. But let's look at that, because this is just unbelievable. So I happened to find that video from 2011 tsunami in Japan. It was in Japanese news. And basically what happens is the dash, how we call it, the camera that's on your dash camera, right? In a car, inside the car. And the guy is driving along that street, and you can see that here he will need to turn. And you see that it's kind of To the right it's uphill, right, it's a little bit of a slope, and to the left is downhill. And let's just watch. So this is the Japanese tsunami, so he comes to that intersection, and then when the earthquake hits. And the guy cannot even stand, you see that guy? And this is the shaking. And he can't even stand up, right? Now, if you know about tsunamis, where do you go? To the right, no, he goes to the left. See what happens next. So the guy, they kind of repeat that, you see, the shake was so strong that now he keeps driving. And it's already too late, unfortunately, because you will see, you see that water?
Oh.
Yeah, that, and that guy saw that and tries to get out, no, it's too late. So in a minute, the water will start flowing from all directions, you see the water?
Oh.
It came from a different street. That's it. And it keeps kind of recording that. And you see how quickly the water goes up. So this is, he had like several seconds to make the right decision. And now the car's floating. And I watched it so many times and I thought like, how come we have that recorded? Because if he's alive, right?
But it doesn't matter, it's.
No, I mean, like who got that recorded? If the person died, then how did they get that recording from that guy? Because you will see what happened at the end. It was like totally, let me just go.
Is this the one that goes in the, under the carport or the city parking or something?
Yeah, so basically, it's still recorded, right? But at some point at the end, the car will be totally covered by water,
Oh.
right? And let's see if I can.
But since the camera's pointing outward, we don't know if the
Yeah.
driver got out.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, that is, that the driver did get out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my hope, of course. I mean, I hope that, you know, he survived because somebody, if we have the report, then somebody had to get that thing out, right? Like the question, who got thing, the only person who knew that that thing was there, right? Otherwise, you don't go through all that debris and look for dash cameras, right? So, then, so we have a seismic analyst in our lab who is from Japan, Ayumi. So I went to Ayumi, I showed her this video, I said, Ayumi, could you find that video in Japanese YouTube or something? Because they were, you know, they were talking about something and I couldn't understand, of course, what they were talking about. And she found that video. So that guy, this is the guy, he survived, he got out of the car, right? And then later he went to the car, he got the dash cam, and it was a Sony dash cam, and he got a memory card, and they dried it up, that memory card, and it was working. I mean, isn't it amazing, the Sony technology, right? And yeah, they found that, and that's why we have it. So the guy said that when the car hit some kind of a pile of other cars, he was able to escape and walk on top of other cars to some kind of building wall or something. But I mean, he knew where his car was stuck. And then later he came back and he retrieved that dash cam. So, or these are just the slide that I had in case you guys have questions, like why water goes away. Do you have a question like that? So the water goes away because, you know, when you remember that when your tsunami is produced, there is an uplift motion, right? Some areas go up, some areas go down, which means that when tsunami is produced, you have a crest and you have a trough. And then trough goes this way and crest goes this way. So basically it means that water doesn't always go away. It goes away only if you are on this side of the tsunami source. which means the trough comes first to you, and when the trough comes first, the water goes away. But if you are on that side of the tsunami source, like it happened in Sri Lanka, so like this is the tsunami in Indonesia, Sri Lanka is here, Thailand is here. In Thailand, the water went down because it was a drought. Sri Lanka is here, they saw a wall of water. That woman who thought that the dogs were mad and the mountains were moving at them, it was that wall of water from the tsunami. And I can stop here. If you have questions, I will ask the questions. But I mean, I totally understand if you want to go home and and eat. So,
Thank you very much.
of course, yeah. Well, why we came here this time? Because we've been working on that beautiful tsunami brochure. It will be, so it goes like this. It's trifold, right? It will be, know your tsunami habit in Cordova, and we will print many of them, probably like for each household. So when you open it, like information about tsunamis in Alaska, here all the contacts for your emergency management and like links to our tsunami report. And when you open it like that, you will see the map. And the hazard zone is clearly indicated by red, and you have other useful information for people who have boats. And you have like assembly areas. And the most important message is if you are not in that red zone, you don't need to evacuate, right? Stay at home. It's called shelter in place. Please don't go to the ski hill. No. If you are not in the red zone, don't go to the ski hill or anywhere, but stay at home. So, yeah, we will finalize that map pretty soon, probably on Monday when we get back, because now we are going to Jakarta with the same kind of presentation. And when we get back, we'll